Hey everyone, it's T and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're going to be doing a Mega Binner Recommend. For those of you who are new, for Binner Recommends, if it's something that we like, we give it a recommend, but if it's something that we like, we chuck it in the bin. For this episode, it's not going to be a normal one. We are going to talk about 8 films. I could pad out this not vlogmas by doing Binner Recommends for each of them separately, but I don't like to do that. It would be a pain in the ass to record 8 small videos, so just do one mega one. So for the first movie for your consideration, we have Underwater. Underwater was released this year, 2020. And it stars Kristen Stewart, Jessica Henwick, TJ Miller, Vincent Cassel, and John Gallagher Jr. Basically, the movie is about a bunch of workers who work for this underwater drilling station, and they survive this cataclysmic event that destroys the station. So Kristen Stewart and about 5 other people have to try to get out of there and find new escape pods to get rescued. So things that I like about the movie. The plot is pretty interesting. Like, we've kind of seen things like it before, but we don't really get to see like too many kind of like underwater escapism things. And then they kept a lot of things realistic as well, which was really good. Even though it's like a sci-fi movie, a lot of the things were kept pretty realistic. So that was a big plus for me. The acting was pretty good. Didn't have a complaint about anyone's performance really. And the cinematography was nice. There were lots of like nice shots. The cause of what happened to destroy the drilling station, the effects on that were also really good. I'm trying not to spoil anything, so that's why I worded it like that if you've seen the movie. So, dislikes. The pacing was kind of wonky. I felt like things could have been cut out in certain areas to make things go along a little bit faster. And it was a little predictable. Like, you could kind of see where things were going as they were happening. It was easy to kind of surmise what would happen next, but it didn't really detract from the enjoyability of it. So, do we give Underwater a bin or a recommend? I would give Underwater a recommend. Like I said, it is a pretty interesting movie. It's not super long as either, so you could knock it out real quick. Acting was good, cinematography was good, even with the negatives like the pacing and it being a little bit predictable. I still enjoyed it and think it's definitely worth the watch. The next movie we have is Dave Made a Maze. This movie came out in 2017. It's a horror adventure movie, and it stars Nick Thune, Mira Rohit Kabani, James Urbaniak, and Adam Bush. Sorry if I butchered any of those names. So Dave Made a Maze is basically about this guy who builds a fort out of cardboard boxes in his living room, and it turns out there's a magical land inside of it, and all of his friends go in and shenanigans ensue. So there's a lot of things to like about this movie. It's pretty funny, it's whimsical, the cinematography and effects are really nice. There's a lot of interesting things that go on visually. Like, there's this one scene where the characters kind of turn into like paper bag puppets, and that's pretty funny and whimsical. For blood, there's like kind of thread or streamers that come out of the person. So those were all really interesting to look at and view. And the music also matches the kind of whimsical, fun vibe of the movie. So that was also pretty nice. I didn't really dislike anything about the movie. It's an hour and 20 minutes. They maybe could have cut, some things here or there. Some of the sequences did run a little long, but it was still entertaining. Even the things that did kind of run a little long, they were still entertaining and fun. So, yeah, nothing that I really disliked about the movie. So, do we give Dave Made a Maze a bin or a recommend? I would give it a recommend. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. It was really whimsical. It was a great way to spend an hour and 20 minutes. I loved it. It was great. The next movie we are going to talk about is Crazy Rich Asians. Crazy Rich Asians stars Constant Wu, Henry Golding, Michelle Yeoh, Awkwafina, and Gemma Chan and Ken Jeong, just to name a few. So basically, this movie came out in 2018. It's a romantic comedy. Basically, the story is about, this couple who ends up going to Singapore to meet the boyfriend's family. And it turns out he and the family are extremely wealthy, which was unbeknownst to her, and shenanigans ensue. I really liked how stylized the movie was. All of the colors, the costuming, the locations, everything in that regard was just impeccable. I would say, that as well as the cinematography. The characters were all pretty interesting. Like, even though you would think that certain people would be certain ways or certain, caricatures or stereotypes, the movie did a really good job at making most of the characters, except for, some of the side characters, multi-dimensional, making them feel like real, actual people. The acting was pretty good as well. Everyone was believable. I didn't feel like anyone was given, any fake wooden performances. Dislikes, again, pacing. I felt like sometimes the movie was dragging a little. I was still entertained, but sometimes I felt like, oh, okay, let's, move this thing along. We don't have to see this particularly or that particularly to get what's going to happen or what will happen or what's going on. And somewhat predictable, but all romantic comedies kind of are. You just kind of know what's going to happen. So do we give it a bin or a recommend? I would give Crazy Rich Asians a recommend. I thought it was really entertaining. Like I said, everything was beautiful. The acting was great. Characterization, great. I mean, it's a romantic comedy, so of course some things are going to be a little bit predictable, but I think it was still definitely worth the watch. The next movie we are going to talk about is Peninsula. This also came out in 2020. It's a action horror movie, and it's kind of a sequel to Train to Busan. It stars Gang Dong-won, Lee Ri, Lee Jung-hung, Koo Kyo-hwan, and Moon Woo-jin. Sorry if I'm pronouncing some of these names wrong. Hopefully I did okay. It takes place sometime after Train to Busan. It's not with those same characters, but basically a group gets sent back to Korea there in order to try to find some gold. And of course, to do that, well, not gold, money. They were trying to find money, sorry. Or was it gold? Well, whatever. They were trying to find something expensive. It was either gold or money. And, of course, they had to battle the zombies as well as other people to get that. It did have an interesting plot. There was a lot that they could have done with it that I feel like they kind of didn't, which goes into dislikes, really. But the characters were decently interesting as well. But there's far more that I disliked than I liked. The pacing was bad. It was very, very bad. And I feel like there was a lot of exposition dumps as well, which we kind of didn't need. And it was kind of boring. Honestly, there were times where I didn't feel entertained at all. I was kind of like, how much longer is this? There were some needless deaths as well. One death in particular towards the end I felt did not need to happen because it didn't. And that was kind of annoying. The effects were also pretty wonky. Not really on the zombies, but on the car chase scenes. There's a lot of driving scenes here. And while they were cool, the effects were pretty wonky on it. And it kind of like threw you out of the moment because you're like, ugh, that CGI is rough. So, do we give Peninsula a bin or a recommend? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to chuck Peninsula in the bin. Like I said, there was far more that I disliked about it than I liked about it, and I feel like it had a lot of potential and it just didn't live up to it. The decision making as far as like what the characters did, how boring it was, I just didn't like it. I wouldn't waste my time watching this. But do watch Train to Busan because that's really good. You will cry. Next up, we have Exorcist 3, aka Legion. I will probably do a more in-depth video on this. But for right now, we're doing little bin or recommend. So this was released in 1990. It's a horror movie / psychological thriller. The movie came out... I just said that it came out in 1990. Sorry. The movie stars George C. Scott, Brad Dourif, Jason Miller, Ed Flanders, and Scott Wilson and Nicole Williamson. So basically what the movie is about is a police lieutenant. He notices similarities between a current murder investigation that he's doing and the methods of a dead killer known as the Gemini Killer, who was executed 15 years before. And he discovers that there's a hospitalized mental patient claiming to be the killer who happens to look like Father Damien from the first Exorcist movie. So, likes. The plot was really interesting, and so were the characters. Like, they all felt like real people, and it was interesting, like, no matter who was on screen, to watch and see what they would do and how they interacted with the other characters. I also really liked the cinematography. There were a lot of really interesting shots. Like, there's this one scene where the Lieutenant Kinderman, he's walking around kind of this like a homeless shelter type location, and it's got like, you know, a bunch of people who are dead and angels like kind of chilling there, and like that scene is really interesting. And like the visuals, the cinematography, like all of that to me was really good. The acting was impeccable as well. Like I said, like, you know, whoever was on screen, you were gripped by their performance. So, dislikes. It could be a little bit boring, and I think that it could have moved the pace along a little bit. It's a little slow. It's a slow burn, but it's definitely worth it. The other thing I didn't like is the forced exorcism scene towards the end of the movie. Didn't need to be there. I know they had to shoe it in, apparently, because that's what the studio wanted, to kind of tie everything into the, you know, original film. But it didn't need to be there, and it kind of showed that it was kind of forced in there. So do we give The Exorcist 3 a bin or a recommend? I would give it a recommend. I was pretty entertained, even though the pacing was a little bit slow, but it was definitely interesting and worth the watch. So this is a TV show, The Boys Season 2. As you've heard in another video, I really like The Boys, one of my favorite things around right now. I really liked the character development this season. They took time to develop a lot of our side cast. We got to know a little bit more about them and love them even more. The humor was also pretty good this season. It wasn't like, you know, gut busts laughing, but it was appropriate and funny when it needed to be. And I really enjoyed how unpredictable everything was this season. Like, you could kind of see where things were going, but when you thought you had something specific pegged, it would be like, nah, and it would slap you around, take you in another direction. The violence and gore was also pretty good. Like, there was a good balance of kind of over the top, silly, comical violence, and like meaningful violence. Like at one moment you got the gang fucking impaling a whale, which isn't really kind of funny, but in the situation it's kind of like ridiculous. And then you have like someone being majorly hurt, and you're like, oh shit, that's fucked up. So, things that I disliked. Hated the weekly format. I didn't hate it enough to complain about it on the internet, but wasn't really a fan of it. The Boys is kind of the type of show where you need to watch it kind of at once, I think. Because I feel like things kind of get lost if you're watching it week to week. Because like something will happen, you'll be like, oh shit, that's related to that thing that happened last week. So I kind of feel like it didn't benefit from being released weekly as far as episodes go. And of course, one relationship that happened that everyone hated. So that was very uncomfortable, and I hope we never have to do that again. So, do we give The Boys Season 2 a bin or a recommend? I definitely give The Boys a recommend. Watch both seasons. It's a really good show. You will be thoroughly entertained. The next thing we have up is the movie The Boy. Not related to our superhero show, The Boys, which we just talked about. The Boy came out in 2016. It's a horror thriller clocking in at 1 hour and 38 minutes. And it stars Lauren Cohen, James Russell, Rupert Evans, and Diane Hardcastle, to name a few. The movie is about a young girl who takes a job as a nanny in this English village that's pretty remote, and it turns out the nanny position is to take care of a life-size doll of a boy, and spooky horror movie shenanigans ensue. So, things that I like. The acting was pretty good. I do like the premise, even though I'm not really a fan of like creepy doll movies. Like creepy doll movies, I mean they're there for a reason. The plot of like a doll or an inanimate object kind of coming to life doing spooky shit, that's interesting to me. I did like the twist at the end. I know people did complain about the twist at the end. They didn't like it. They thought it could go in a bunch of other different directions, which is fair. It could have been a little bit different, but I enjoyed the twist. I thought that it was unexpected, for me anyway, so I enjoyed the twist. Dislikes. It did drag on for quite a bit. Even though it's only like an hour and 38 minutes, I felt like some of that could have been cut because it was a little bit boring and it kind of bogged everything down some bits. How we had to go through literal days of our main character, Greta, not really taking care of the doll Brahms properly. I think that could have been more condensed than it was. But other than that, nothing else that I really disliked. So, do we give The Boy a bin or a recommend? I give it a recommend. It's not that long, and even though it does drag a bit, I still found it entertaining, and I think it was worth the watch. The last movie we are going to talk about is Rebecca. This is also a 2020 film. It's a romance mystery clocking in at 2 hours and a minute. It stars Lily James, Armie Hammer, Kristen Scott Thomas, Sam Riley, and Ann Dowd, just to name a few. What this movie is about is a young woman arrives at her husband's big English estate and finds that the people there, as well as his family, are constantly measuring up to his first wife, Rebecca, who has died. And, it's kind of her trying to cement her place as the new wife. And shenanigans ensue. This film is very pretty. The locations are nice. The cinematography is nice. Aesthetically, it's very pleasing. But the acting wasn't that great. And it was also boring. Like, even, for for a mystery, it just didn't keep you entertained. You just wanted to figure out what the fuck was going on so the movie would end, honestly. So that's really all I have to say about it. Do we give Rebecca a bin or a recommend? I would give this movie a big old bin. It was just boring. It wasn't really entertaining, and just because a movie is aesthetically pleasing doesn't mean that's enough to make it interesting. Like, it was just boring. It was bogged down by melodrama. I didn't like it. Well, there you have it, folks. Let me know what you guys thought of these movies. Are there any other movies that you would like me to review or do a bin or recommend on? Did you like this longer format bin or recommend where we do multiple movies instead of just one at a time? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, 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 bye.